Yeah, I had called the center and they gave me an email to access everything.
Okay. All right. Where is everybody this morning? Okay, anybody got any questions before we start taking a quick look at some of the info in Chapter 7? Questions or comments about Chapter 7?
No, ma'am.
Okay, let's see. It should work. Yeah, okay. Okay. All right, so Chapter 7 has some disturbing information in it, I think, but very useful to understand and maybe be able to recognize if you are having issues or if someone else you know is having issues with drug use. Again, going back to Chief Malden's talk with you a few weeks ago, I think right now they're seeing an increase in substance abuse of one kind or another just because people are cooped up at home. A lot of people have lost their jobs, and so there's a lot of stress and maybe some depression, and so I think that people are turning to drugs, maybe who wouldn't otherwise, because of being busy and being careful, and then all this happens and they're stuck at home, and what do? So I think it's a really relevant chapter right now. So illicit drugs are those that are not illegal. Our book adds marijuana there, so it depends which state you're in at the moment over here as to whether or not marijuana use is legal, whether it's only legal for medical situations. So that one's a bit kind of problematical right now. I think that it's really important that you keep track of where you go, right, in the US at the moment. As I said, in some states it's okay, in other states it isn't okay. So if you use marijuana in any form, then make sure that you check the rules where you're going. You may need to be a little more careful. Right? Cigarettes and alcohol. I'm going to kind of scoot over cigarettes and alcohol a little bit because the next chapter is specifically about those two drugs. So I'm going to concentrate on some of the information that is on some of the other illicit drug use and the illegal drugs. The illegal drugs are drugs that you cannot use anywhere. They have no acceptable medical use in the States, okay? So you can't buy them, so things like cocaine, heroin, meth, you can't legally buy them, you can't legally make them, right? Possess them, so try to stay away from those if you really can. So what's interesting in the data in this chapter, I thought, was that they were mentioning that approximately 10% of individuals who are 12 and older are current illicit drug users. And if you go to figure 7.3, there's some interesting statistics there based on age. I'm hoping that the 12-year-olds are smoking cigarettes or drinking alcohol. Not that I'm hoping that that's what they're doing, because that's really bad for their brain development, but out of all the choices of things they could be doing, let's hope it's cigarettes and alcohol. 25%, so a quarter of full-time college students, so people your age, your population, right, own up to taking one or more illicit drugs during the past 30 days. Okay? So again, that can be problematical because it depends which one, right? If you're smoking a cigarette, that's horrible. It's really bad for you. It's bad for everybody around you. But it's not illegal as a college student to smoke a cigarette. But if you're drinking, right, then the rules in this country make that a problem for you. So be careful, right? Maybe steer clear of alcohol as much as you can until you're 21. I'm not a fan of that law, as you might be guessing, but it is what it is. So, what do you think motivates people to use illicit drugs? Right? What are some of the reasons that people use these types of drugs?
A bad home life.
Say that again for me.
A bad home life or bad situations at home.
Okay, could be, right? Yeah, absolutely. It could be that the drugs are easily available in the house at home, right? Because the parents or whoever is using them. It could be that home life is not very happy because there's a lot of arguments, or maybe there's some other kind of psychological or physical abuse, and so people might turn to drugs to try to cope as a coping strategy there. Yeah. You know, some of them we use because they're pleasurable, right? I mean, I've never touched a cigarette in my life, but I know my mum and dad and sister smoked, you know, and their face when they took that first puff in the morning kind of lit up. You know, it's quite bizarre to watch, because I'm like, okay, it stinks, it can't possibly taste nice, why are you doing this, right? So, trying not to be judgmental as I get older, but when I was younger, I was pretty bad. You know, at least alcohol tastes good. At least to me, alcohol tastes good. I guess to a lot of people, alcohol doesn't taste good. So they would say, why on earth would you drink a glass of red wine? It tastes disgusting, right? A lot of teenagers get inquisitive, right? They've not ever had it, and they want to know what it does. What does it taste like? What does it do? What's the effect that I get from it? So that can often be a motivation for younger individuals to start, right? Oops. So, one of the questions that this chapter and the next chapter ask us is, do you believe that you're drug dependent, right? That's one of the things that we have to be delving into, okay? And you can share or not share. As we've said before, this is a safe space. No one's going to be in trouble or anything for sharing experiences here. But drug dependent, I like the term dependence rather than addiction. Addiction sounds so, I don't know, evil somehow. So, do we admit to being dependent on a drug, right? Is it a habitual pattern that we use on a regular basis? Does it become a compulsive psychological or physiological behavior, right? I need to do it, right? So that's tricky, especially when we get to the next chapter, right? When I think about my drug use, I don't even consider alcohol as drug use, and yet it clearly is, right? So I have some facing up and things to do when I look at these chapters, because I have a drink every day. So is that okay? Is that bad? Does that make me dependent? These are all questions I have to be asking myself. Okay. If you're dependent, then typically you're unable to avoid these drugs. Depending on the level of dependency, then you may become really preoccupied to the point where they start to interfere with your home life or your social life or your work life, right? I had a boyfriend long time in another life who was a marijuana user, and he smoked a lot of pot. And he probably would have said he was not dependent on that, but he could not hold down a job, hence he's an ex-boyfriend. Couldn't hold down a job. First thing in the morning, even before a cup of coffee, he had to light a spliff, right? I mean, there were these behaviors that just were not manageable, right? And he got himself kicked out of many jobs while we were seeing each other. So, you know, you've got to really think about, how am I using them? Why am I using them? When am I using them? Right? So, do we believe that everyone who tried some form of drug as a teenager, right, then becomes an illicit drug user or addicted to drugs, right? So that's quite an interesting question, I think. You know, if you tried a cigarette at a party when you were a teenager, or a few cigarettes at a few parties, are you now an addicted smoker? Not necessarily, right? Not everybody takes that habit and it becomes something that's an addiction. Cigarettes are highly addictive, and that's one of the issues I have with them, because the cigarette companies knew that when they marketed them. We'll get more into that in chapter 8. You know, does everybody who tries, I don't know, I don't even know what street drugs are around at the moment. I know we have a meth problem in Portales and Clovis, so let's say, does everybody who tries meth become a meth addict? Probably not, right? I mean, it's one of the stronger drugs on the road to using something in a bad way, right? But does everybody who tries it once or twice become dependent on it, right? So I think that's something to bear in mind when we're talking about this. right? If we use drugs a lot, then often what happens is that we develop this idea of tolerance. So psychoactive drugs repeatedly over an extended time lead to adaptations in the body to deal with that drug as effectively as it can. And so then what happens is you have to take more of the drug to get the same feeling, right? So depending on why you take the drug, if you're taking it to get that high because it feels good at the time, right? Then the more I use whichever drug, the more my body will adapt to that drug, and then I have to take more of the drug to get the same feeling, all right? So once you're at that level, right, once you've got that level of tolerance, then stopping can become difficult, right? I have to go through a withdrawal period, which, again, depending upon what drug or what addiction it is, can be worse or not so bad, depending on what it is, right? So look at table 7.7. It's bigger. Table 7.7. Where did that table go? There we go. It's on page 232. That's a really interesting piece of information. If you haven't finished reading this chapter yet, go look at this table because it gives you a list of psychoactive drugs, the impact that they have, and how easy it is to develop tolerance, what withdrawal is like, what addiction looks like. So it's a cool one. Where's the sleeping bell? There we go. So one of the things I wanted to point out about withdrawal, and it's not very nice at all, so I apologize ahead of time. But I think it's important to understand this impact. If you drink alcohol while you're pregnant, and it's not just one drink a week or one drink a month, on a rare occasion. If you are drinking while you are pregnant, then that baby is likely to be born with what we call fetal alcohol syndrome. And there are a couple of different levels of fetal alcohol syndrome, but basically what happens is because that alcohol can pass across the placenta, the baby becomes addicted to alcohol. And there are some physiological things that happen, including some brain development issues. But one of the things that happens is when that baby is born and the placenta is cut, that baby now no longer has access to alcohol. And so the baby has to go through withdrawal in the hospital unit before it's okay. So we make a baby addicted to alcohol, and that baby has to go through withdrawal. It's the first thing it has to do when it's born. Right? So I think that's something it's not comfortable to think about, but it's really important to understand that our actions can have some really significant impacts on other people. Right? So psychological dependence is a little bit different to physiological dependence, because physiological dependence, I think you get this like drive, like I have to have this, or I'll get the shakes, or I can't concentrate, or I can't sleep, or, right? So psychological dependence is a little bit different, because here we're looking at a situation where I'm wanting to take it because I'm bored, or it's the way that I relieve my stress. Remember a week or two ago we talked about what strategy do we pick when we're stressed or upset? You know, do we pick the exercise strategy, or do we reach for the bottle of wine, right? Which one do we pick? And that could be an indicator of this kind of level of psychological dependence, right? So it can look like physiological dependence sometimes because the person is craving the drug, but it's not a chemical craving, it's a thought, emotional craving, right? So from the outside, it might be difficult to tell the difference if you're interacting with that individual, right? And then this question I find really interesting. Is there a difference between habitual use and dependency or abuse of a drug? Right? So that's something, you know, if you smoke, and the only time you smoke is when you are with friends or at a party, or you're in some kind of social gathering and you have a cigarette, but you never ever buy a packet of cigarettes or light cigarettes, you don't smoke at home, you don't smoke on your way to work, you don't smoke, but you'll have a cigarette if you're with friends, right? Is that dependency, right? I don't believe so, but I'm not telling you what you should think, right? I want you to read the information in the chapter and make your own decisions about this information, because this information can impact your health and wellness for the rest of your life, right? So they include prescription sedatives and depressants and sleeping drugs, right? All of which I take, okay? So am I addicted, am I dependent on my mental health drugs, or am I a habitual user of mental health drugs, right? I guess we'll find out when it's time for me to start weaning off them. I don't know, right? I certainly, on an acute situation, if I forget to take my sleeping sedative, I do not sleep. If I forget to take my antidepressant, on that day, I can't say that I feel a difference, that I see a difference. But the sleeping one, immediate. And yet, my subscriber says there's no research to indicate addiction to this drug. Right? So there's something in my brain when the drug shuts my brain down. If I don't take the drug, I do not sleep all night. Right? So, I don't know. These, as I said, it's not a judgmental thing. It's a learning opportunity. Right? So that you can make some decisions about, do I want to take this? Do I want to use this? Am I taking it as a one-off? Right? factors I think are fascinating. There are some genetic risk factors, right? So alcoholism, which really goes into the next chapter, but alcoholism can run in families. Now that could be an environmental scenario, but there is research that indicates that for some people, there are genetic triggers, right? And so a family who has 2 or 3 people in it who are alcoholics could also have 2 or 3 people in it who are not alcoholics because they don't have the genetic trigger that the other 3 do, right? So that's always fascinating to me, that there are certain people who are more likely, if they try drugs, to get hooked and get addicted to drugs, right? As we said earlier, if there's a home scenario where adults are abusing drugs, then that could lead to, it's an interesting thing, isn't it? If you live with an alcoholic and you see what that does to your family, does that make you never want to drink alcohol? Or does it make you more likely to drink alcohol, right? I think there's some personality issues involved as well. Lack of parental attachment to the child, so that can cause some issues. But there are also protective factors in that same idea, right? If we've got a very strong family unit and we are doing well at school, or we enjoy school, or we have lots of friends at school, right? And if there are clear rules about, don't come home, don't be sticking your head down the toilet vomiting. I can deal with you having a drink. Let's try to learn how we manage drinking, right? It's different over here. Culturally, in Europe, it's a very different situation to how it is over here. Like, my parents used to give us wine and water at dinner, right? When we were little kids. But, you got to go back and go, oh yeah, it was like a drop of wine and then a glass full of water. But we thought we were having a drink, But then I think that we did not grow up to be abusive with alcohol. So was it a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. I expect most parents in the States would say bad, because it's not culturally acceptable over here to give your kids alcohol when they're 6, 7, 8, 9, right? So that plays a big role as well, right? Do we see more or less drug abuse amongst athletes? Okay, that's interesting to always look at, right? You would expect that there would be less drug, at least I would expect there would be less drug use amongst athletes, because they've got to go out and perform, and most of these drugs negatively impact motor skill performance. But when you look at the research, there's quite a lot of drug abuse amongst athletes in college, okay? For various reasons. Right? They're under pressure, they get nervous, so they think that it will calm them down, or there's a lot of pressure to win, and that doesn't sit well. They don't have a better coping mechanism. There's all kinds of interesting variables that are involved in the in a college population, right? First time away from home, you've got your own money to do whatever whatever, right? Oops, white. That didn't work well, did it? So, one thing I want to make really, really clear, right, is that if you or someone you know feels like you're having a problem or you feel like you're borderline, then go get help, right? There is no stigma. There should be no stigma about anybody going to get help to be more healthy, right? And I think that we've got to change the mentality around getting help, right? Because it's a big step for anybody to go get help, whether it's mental health help, whether it's drug, substance help. It's a big step to A, own up that you need help, and then to do it, right? Because it's difficult to do it without at least some people knowing about it. And then there's always that worry that there's going to be judgment. It shouldn't be judgment. I made a decision to improve my health, right? That's a strong stand to take. And it's really, really important that that's what we put forth, that that's what we believe, right? So that friends or family aren't afraid that we're going to be judging of them if they go and get help. Right? The help can take different forms, right? That they may need some medical supervision, particularly if it's drug dependency, right? They may need to be weaned off that drug under medical supervision because it's not safe to just let them go home and stop taking it, right? So it could be an outpatient program, you know, it could be going seeing a counselor, it could be going to AA, right? There's all kinds of options, right? But you have to stick with them. So the research on effectiveness of some of these programs is that you've got to be there for a minimum of 3 months, right? Preferably longer. It takes time to create a habit, and it takes time to break a habit, right? And you have to find something else. You may, not you have to, I'm sorry, that was wrong use of the word. You may need to find another healthy habit to replace the unhealthy habit, and then you have to develop that habit, right? So there's a lot involved, a lot going on, okay? If you're struggling with a drug substance abuse and you have mental health issues, then that's a very difficult situation to manage. So for a lot of military who come back and they have very sadly developed PTSD, and then they start drinking or using some stronger drug, that's a very, very difficult situation to manage, right? A lot of homeless people are homeless because they had mental health issues or drug dependency issue, right? They quite often go together, but it's a difficult problem to manage. If my mental health is good and what I have is a physiological addiction, then I've got the brain space to make a choice. Right? But what if I'm not mentally healthy? So, questions? Comments? other than, oh my gosh, Dr. Ward is a junkie. I'm not a junkie. I drink red wine, I eat ice cream, and I take my mental health meds. But it might sound like worse than that. What do you think about the information in this chapter? What did you learn? What was something that you did not know that came out in this chapter that caught your eye?
I didn't know that drugs were influence, or that they were classified as addictive.
Say that again. Sorry, it's really garbled this end. Try again for me.
I didn't know that certain drugs were inhalants. I just thought they were normal.
Right. Yeah, the inhalant info and the glue sniffing thing and yeah, very odd choice. I'm not sure that anyone could say they did inhalants for fun. It has to be for, because it feels nice. It can't feel nice, surely. It has to be for the hit that you get when it gets into the system. Yeah. There is quite a big drug problem in this part of New Mexico. Roswell, Portales, Clovis all have a lot of issues with meth, and I remember we were driving through Roswell one time, and all these like dark window black SUVs were pulled up outside this house, and all these guys, I mean, I assume they were guys because they were big, but maybe they weren't all guys, but like you couldn't see their faces. They had these black helmets on and black gear and bulletproof vests and big guns, and they had all these people out from this house kind of up against the wall, and it was quite scary. But yeah, it's for real around here. You don't have to dig too deep to see some of the effects of it around here. What else? What else did someone learn that they didn't know in this chapter? Gracelyn, anything that was new for you?
Not really, because growing up in like Albuquerque, we were always taught and told about like the use of drugs.
Okay. In school or by your parents?
In school, like in my senior year of high school, we had to do like reports on common use drugs in high school. Students.
Okay, interesting. That's cool. That's a good approach, I would think. Yeah, I don't know much about the situation in Albuquerque. I guess cities are cities all around the world, so it's probably bad. Ryan comes from Albuquerque, so he's saying it's not good there. Okay, all right, well, let me just tell you about this for this Friday and the following Friday. So I have a very special guest speaker lined up, but she was not available this week. So I'm going to swap over the activities this Friday and next Friday. So this Friday, we will have the joy of trying to learn the ooh na 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 dance, which is really complicated. People make it look so easy, but I find it really difficult. So that is going to be a whole heap of fun this Friday. I've got lots of different bits of video, and my partner and I will make complete fools of ourselves trying to do it with you on the camera. So yeah, that'll be a lot of fun this Friday, and then the following Friday, all being good, we will have a Zoom meeting with my special guest for you, okay? Which I think will be eye-opening, hopefully. All right, anything else? Any other questions or comments? No? All right. Well, have a lovely day. Is Japheth in or did... Japheth, can you stay on for me? I need to have a quick chat.
What is it?